Hello and welcome to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard. Real glad that you could join us for another segment. Returning guest Allison London Brown, CEO of LUMINELLE, is returning to discuss LUMINELLE SUSTAINE system and the recently FDA-cleared LUMINELLE Bx, the RotoSheath, of which she's a co-inventor. She's also going to talk about the uptick in the number of women diagnosed with uterine cancer due to the pandemic lockdown and certain procedures being considered elective. She'll also share some of her thoughts on the need for uterine cancer screening in addition to mammograms and the disparity when it comes to women's health. Welcome back, Allison. How have you been?
I'm good. Thanks so much, Neil. I look forward to having a very important conversation with you today.
Now, for those who aren't familiar with you as a contributor, you've got more than 20 years of diverse medical device, consumer, and pharmaceutical experience in healthcare. Give us a brief look into your professional background and tell us what makes Allison London Brown tick.
Yeah, well, that makes me always sound so old, so I don't like to talk about all the things that I've done. I'm actually 82. No, I think, I've been in healthcare my whole career, and I have a little bit of that, idealistic perspective, that passion about really trying to make the world a better place. And I've chosen to do it through developing products specifically for women. I've been mostly in women's health in my career. And, as much as we talk about women's health and we talk about how women are the gatekeepers and they make the decisions, when you really look at the expenditures and where money is going towards disease fighting and diagnosis, unfortunately, I think we do get the short end of the stick many times, especially when you look at even reimbursement and what is paid for certain conditions. So anyway, there's my soapbox. So my passion is really about trying to change the world and make it a better place than when I came into it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, if you would give us an overview of uterine cancer, its prevalence, the unmet need.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a big topic to kind of unpack here, but I'll try to do this very succinctly. I think what the listeners should know, and it was something that I have been researching. I'm a reformed scientist, so I was a researcher back in my past, and again, have been in women's health my whole career, and really did not know these statistics. So in 2022, 23, uterine cancer has now risen to the fourth leading cause of cancer and the sixth leading cause of death for women, which is pretty astonishing when you think about, all the other things: heart disease, diabetes, colon cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. But it's really kind of a scary stat. And you couple that with the fact that African American women have an 8% growth rate year over year since 2017 in the prevalence of uterine cancer. Hispanics are 6% growth rate, and even white women are 2%. So we're seeing this growth rate of uterine cancer. And unfortunately, we're also seeing more women dying from it. And quite honestly, it's because we've not truly identified the best way or the correct standard of care to diagnose uterine disorders, especially uterine cancer. So, and go ahead.
Well, what is the current standard of care to detect and diagnose uterine cancers?
Yeah. So I was going to lead right into that. Okay. So, today, just like a colonoscopy, right? You would think you would go in with a camera, a very small camera. You would take a sample, and then a physician would be able to see what looks suspicious, but then they would also be able to take out that specific tissue. Well, unfortunately, our standard of care, I should say the state of care, not the standard, but the state of care for most endometrial or uterine disorders is to use a curette style or a DNC. So it's a blind approach where the physician will go in with a small straw and it has a vacuum, and they take out what they think is tissue. And unfortunately, not only are we not getting the correct tissue, so the actual diseased tissue, but in talking with some of the major lab groups in the country, they have statistics that state 60 to 70% of the samples they receive from endometrial biopsies are there's no tissue there. Mm. So we think there's tissue, but there's not. And so, you're delaying diagnosis. And I think the other thing about uterine cancer is that it spreads pretty, it can metastasize just like breast cancer. Mm-hmm. But stage 1 uterine cancer is contained in the uterus. Stage 2, it's moved to the cervix. Stage 3, it's now outside of the uterus. So by the time you're in stage 3, you're already moving past the reproductive system. And so imagine trying to detect and diagnose just in a self-contained organ, and now it's spread. Now what are you going to do? So a hysterectomy doesn't necessarily solve your issue either, because now it may have spread. So, I mean, I think this is a multifactorial problem. But the simple answer is really, you just have to be able to see. I mean, I know that sounds so silly, but right now the challenge with being able to use a scope and to do the diagnosis the standard way, the more accurate way, is kind of overwhelming for the majority of office staff. It's a bigger scope. You have to dilate the cervix. When you dilate the cervix, that's more pain for the patient. It means you have to use anesthesia. So again, it's a multifactorial problem for the office. And so now you're left with going to the OR and increased costs and yada, yada, yada. So, I mean, like I said, there's a whole lot to unpack in just understanding not only the standards of today, but all the challenges of today.
The recently FDA-cleared LUMINELLE Bx, RotoSheath, how does this system improve upon the current standard?
Yeah, so it's very simple. We have an endoscopic system. Our scope is less than 2 millimeters in diameter, so we're already under the size of most diagnostic scopes to begin with. And then we have a range of RotoSheaths which slide over the scope and allow physicians to do a lot of different things from diagnosis to operative procedures. What we have done is taken that same approach of sampling, which is just a small hole at the end of our sheath and a vacuum using a syringe, putting vacuum to the tissue, and it allows them to see, diagnose, and sample with one device. No other instruments are needed, and they can do it with one cervical pass. And because of the size is very equivalent to a diagnostic scope, so we're talking 3 to 4 millimeters, they don't need to use any kind of sedation. They can do this using a paracervical block, which means you can do it right in your office, which means you can do something in 15 minutes, and then a woman can go home. Mm-hmm. So you're reducing the risk, you're reducing the cost, you're reducing the time to diagnosis, and you're getting an adequate and accurate sample the first time. So, I mean, it sounds almost too good to be true, but literally all we're doing is taking this same curette approach and applying it to our sheath, which slides over our scope. So we're giving visualization where it's needed.
Are there any plans to expand the capabilities of Luminelle? And when can we start to see LUMINELLE Bx in doctors' offices?
So Luminelle, the endoscopic system, we have clearance for the bladder, for the uterus, and actually we have for the biopsy the indications for rectal and anal cancers. So we are certainly looking at how this very simple system could be used for a variety of places that are really needed. And in terms of LUMINELLE Bx, we are doing a beta launch this fall. We hope to have kind of a full launch in first quarter next year, and we're very excited to be working with Dr. Amy Garcia and other physicians on this beta and making sure that we have this a very simple, easy way for physicians to detect uterine cancer and disorders in their office the first time.
Give us a website where we can learn more.
Sure. It's www.luminelle360, so 360.com.
Allison, I appreciate your time this morning, hoping that you'll come back and let us know how LUMINELLE Bx progresses. Thank you much.
Sure.
You've been listening to Health Professional Radio. I'm your host, Neil Howard, in conversation with returning guest Allison London Brown. Audio copies of this program are available at healthprofessionalradio.com.au. You can also find us at Anchor, Spotify, and be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Health Professional Radio.